Eliana gave her only meal of the day to an elderly stranger who seemed lost, sitting alone on a worn wooden bench beneath an old willow tree. The park was quiet that afternoon, the heat pressing down on everything, the air smelling faintly of dust and cut grass. She felt her stomach clench at the sacrifice, but she pushed aside the hunger. The old man's eyes were cloudy, and he sat with his hands folded in his lap, confusion drifting across his features like a slow-moving shadow. Eliana hesitated, looking at the wrinkled paper wrapped around her small sandwich. It was all she had until dinner, and dinner was never guaranteed. She swallowed, stepped closer, and offered it wordlessly. The old man looked up, meeting her gaze for a moment before nodding slowly. He whispered a thank you, his voice trembling and distant, as though he wasn't entirely sure where he was. Eliana smiled softly, sat beside him on the bench, and split the sandwich in half so he could hold it more easily. She knew what it was like to feel uncertain and afraid, and if she could bring him even a moment's comfort, it was worth the hollow ache in her own stomach. They ate in silence, the afternoon sun slanting through the willow's branches. Eliana tried to imagine her grandfather, who had passed years before. She recalled how her mother sometimes talked about him, how kind he had been, how he always found a way to smile even on dark days. Maybe if someone had been there for him, if he had ever been lost, they would have helped him too. Thinking that way made her feel a bit stronger about her decision. Eventually, a man in a crisp shirt and slacks arrived, his eyes scanning the park as if searching for someone precious. He spotted the old man and hurried over, calling out, "Papa, there you are." Eliana felt a wave of relief. The old man looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. The younger man, perhaps in his 30s, crouched down, concern etched across his face. He glanced at Eliana, took in the situation, the shared sandwich, the gentle way she had stayed with his father, and his stern expression softened. He thanked her sincerely. It wasn't a casual thanks, but one weighted with emotion. Eliana only nodded, adjusting her worn backpack on her shoulder, mumbling that it was nothing. She stood and excused herself, needing to get home. There was always work to do, chores to finish, and the long walk back would eat away at her evening. She headed back through streets lined with peeling paint and cracked pavement. The small house she shared with her mother, her younger sister Natalia, and her brother Pablo was tucked between others, just like it. Some had dim lights, some were dark. The electricity had been cut off again a week ago. Her mother, Rosa, was trying her best, working odd jobs when she could find them, but the bills were relentless and the money was never enough. Eliana had started working after school at a little bicycle and appliance repair shop a few blocks away. Carmen, the shop owner, paid her a small amount to help organize tools, sweep up, and fetch parts. It wasn't much, but it was something. Inside the house, the dim light through the window revealed her mother sitting at the small kitchen table, a stack of unpaid bills and shut-off notices spread before her. Rosa looked up as Eliana entered, worry etched into the lines on her face. "You're late," her mother said quietly. Eliana shrugged, not mentioning the old man or the sandwich. Instead, she helped with the chores and tried to make the evening feel a bit lighter. She boiled some water over the gas burner, luckily they still had the gas on, and made a simple meal of rice and beans. It was bland, but it filled the emptiness. After everyone had eaten, after she had helped Natalia with her reading and Pablo with his arithmetic, Eliana lay in bed, listening to the night sounds. A distant dog barked, a motorbike rumbled by, and through the thin walls, she could hear a neighbor's muffled argument. She tried not to think about her empty stomach. Tomorrow would be another hard day. School in the morning, the repair shop in the afternoon, and somehow figuring out how to keep moving forward. The next morning arrived in a haze of pink light. Eliana left early, slipping out quietly. She had school to attend. On the way, she passed the park again. The willow tree was still there, its leaves rustling softly. She wondered briefly if the old man had made it home safely, if he was all right now. She hoped so. She tried not to linger on it, though. There were real, immediate problems waiting for her. The electricity bill that loomed over their heads, the worn-out soles of her shoes that threatened to fall apart with every step, the pit in her stomach that came from skipping breakfast again. At school, Eliana did her best to blend into the background. She never had the neat clothes or fancy shoes some of her classmates wore. Her shoes had fraying edges, and her uniform had been patched twice. She kept her head down and focused on her work. The teachers droned on about history, mathematics, language arts, but Eliana's mind was elsewhere. She thought about how she would organize the toolbox for Carmen later, and how she might ask for a small advance. She thought about how her mother might find more stable work. Every problem needed a solution, and she was trying to find them one by one, even if it felt like trying to carry water in a leaking bucket. During lunch, Eliana sat alone under a scraggly tree in the schoolyard. She unwrapped a tiny piece of bread, her lunch for the day, and stared at it for a long moment. Before she could take a bite, she heard mocking laughter. A voice rang out, "Hey, nice shoes!" She knew that tone. A group of boys stood a short distance away, all wearing clean sneakers and crisp shirts. Mateo, the leader, smirked at her. His friend Javier snickered. Eliana's face burned with shame, but she forced herself to ignore them. She kept her eyes down, nibbled at her bread, and waited for their laughter to fade. She didn't have the energy for anger or fighting. She had learned long ago that it achieved nothing but trouble. When the final bell rang, Eliana rushed out to start her shift at Carmen's repair shop. Carmen was kind but firm, a woman in her 50s with strong arms and a commanding presence. Eliana admired her. She swept the floors, organized shelves, and handed Carmen tools as requested. Carmen was working on a small engine that day, cursing softly under her breath whenever a bolt refused to budge. The work kept Eliana's hands busy and her mind focused. It felt good to be useful, to know she was contributing something real. When the shift ended, Eliana thanked Carmen and headed home, her legs heavy with fatigue. She turned the corner onto her street and froze. Parked in front of her house was a sleek, expensive car, unlike any she had seen in their neighborhood. Her heart thumped as she recognized the man stepping out of it. The younger man from the park, the one whose father she had helped. He wore a sharp jacket and dress pants, and when he saw her, he gave a small, warm smile. She approached cautiously, unsure why he was here or what it meant. "Eliana, right?" he asked, his voice gentle. She nodded. He introduced himself as Sergio Alvarez. His father was the man she had helped in the park the other day, a man struggling with Alzheimer's who had wandered off. "I've been looking for you," Sergio said. "My father told me about the girl who helped him, who shared her meal. I just wanted to thank you properly." Eliana's legs felt shaky. She stammered that it was no big deal, but Sergio shook his head. "No, it was a big deal to us. You showed him kindness and kept him safe until I found him." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Eliana's eyes widened, guessing its contents. She backed away slightly, shaking her head. I can't take that," she said quietly. "My mother doesn't like handouts." Sergio's eyes were understanding. "I respect that," he said. "Look, I'm not offering charity. Consider it a thank you, and perhaps we can talk about something else. A job, maybe. Is your mother home?" Eliana hesitated, then nodded. He followed her to the door. Inside, Rosa looked startled to see a well-dressed stranger entering their cramped living space. Eliana explained the situation quickly, cheeks flushed with uncertainty. Sergio spoke calmly, explaining how Eliana had helped his father and how he wanted to give something back. He offered Rosa the envelope, saying, "This isn't just money. I run a small logistics company, and I need someone reliable to help with some office work. You would earn every bit of this. Not a handout, but fair compensation." Rosa was skeptical, but Eliana caught the glimmer of hope in her mother's eyes. With a trembling hand, Rosa accepted the envelope. "If it's a job," she said firmly, "I'll do it. I'll work hard." Sergio smiled broadly. "That's all I ask. I'll return tomorrow morning and we can discuss the details. We'll start as soon as you're ready." He thanked them both again and left, the sound of his expensive car's engine fading into the evening air. Eliana and Rosa stood there, stunned. Natalia and Pablo peeked around the corner, curious. The flickering candlelight cast their shadows on the walls. Rosa's eyes were filled with tears she tried to hide. She pulled Eliana into a hug. "You did this," she whispered. "Your kindness made this happen." Eliana had never felt so relieved in her life. Maybe this was the breakthrough they needed. Maybe the electricity would come back on soon. She held her mother's hand, imagining a future with fewer worries. They made a modest dinner and ate together, the children noticing their mother's lighter mood, the subtle lift of her shoulders. Hope was a delicate thing, but tonight it felt a little more solid, like a candle flame protected from the wind. The next morning, Sergio returned as promised. He brought papers, explained the work at his company's small distribution office, and Rosa signed the forms. The pay wasn't extraordinary, but it was stable, better than anything they had in a long while. Rosa would start the next day. As Sergio left, he looked at Eliana and said, "Your kindness changed something, for me and my father. I hope you know that." Eliana flushed, nodded, and watched him drive away. For once, she felt pride in something she had done. But there were still challenges. She could not allow herself to relax too much. She had to keep working at the repair shop, help pay down the backlog of bills. It would take time before everything stabilized, but at least they had a chance. At school that day, Eliana found herself drifting from her usual spot in the corner of the yard. She felt different, a bit stronger. That was when a girl named Lucia approached her shyly. Lucia was new. Her family recently moved into the neighborhood. She wore slightly outdated clothes, her hair braided neatly. "Hi," Lucia said softly. "I saw you sitting alone yesterday. Mind if I join you?" Eliana was surprised. She nodded uncertainly, and they sat together under the same scraggly tree. Lucia offered half of her sandwich. Eliana hesitated, then accepted, grateful. They talked quietly about school, about how hard the math tests were, about the teachers who droned on and on. No mention was made of clothes or money, just the normal complaints of students. When Lucia found out Eliana worked at a repair shop, she was impressed, and when Eliana mentioned that her mother had just gotten a job, Lucia's face lit up, as if proud on her behalf. It was such a small thing, just a conversation, just two girls sharing lunch, but it felt like a crack in the wall of isolation Eliana had built around herself. Of course, the bullies were still there. Matteo spotted them talking and snorted. "What, you found a friend?" he sneered one afternoon. But Eliana didn't react the way she used to. She remembered what Carmen had said, that it didn't matter what others thought, and what her mother had said, that they were moving forward. She just ignored Matteo. Lucia pretended not to hear him. Eventually, their laughter faded. They were losing interest now that Eliana didn't break or flinch as easily. After school, Eliana hurried to the repair shop. Carmen greeted her with a nod. "You're a bit late," she said, though not angrily. Eliana explained quickly that she'd stayed a moment to talk to a friend, and Carmen raised an eyebrow. "A friend, huh? Good, you could use one." They got to work. Carmen showed Eliana how to sort different parts by size and function. There was something comforting about this work, understanding how pieces fit together to make something run. It made sense in a way that life seldom did. And maybe, Eliana thought, learning these skills could help her one day. Perhaps she could become a mechanic or a technician, something practical that earned a decent wage. That evening, when Eliana returned home, she found her mother practicing handwriting on a piece of scrap paper. She was trying to make her writing neat for the new job. The electricity was still off, but the envelope Sergio had given them would help. They might be able to make a payment soon. Rosa's face lit up when she saw Eliana. "Guess what?" Rosa said, holding up a small receipt. "I paid part of the bill today. We'll have lights again soon." Eliana felt tears prick her eyes. She sat beside her mother, resting her head on Rosa's shoulder, feeling lighter than she had in months. The next few days were a whirlwind of small but significant improvements. Rosa started at the distribution office, learning to file paperwork, handle simple phone calls, and track shipments. Sergio came by to check on her progress and seemed pleased. Eliana noticed her mother walking straighter, her voice more confident when she spoke about her work at home. Natalia and Pablo beamed with pride, telling their classmates that their mother had a real job now. Eliana kept her routine, school, then the shop, but she felt a new purpose behind it all. One afternoon, Carmen surprised Eliana by inviting her to step beyond just sweeping and fetching tools. "I want to show you how to fix a punctured bicycle tire," she said. Eliana's eyes widened. "Really?" Carmen nodded. "You've earned the chance to learn something new." Eliana listened carefully, asked questions, and soon her hands were working a tire lever and patching a tube. Her palms got dirty, grease smudged her cheek, but she didn't mind. She felt competent, capable. As Eliana grew more confident, the tension in her chest began to ease. She still wore patched clothes and worn-out shoes, but soon they might afford something better. She still didn't bring elaborate lunches to school, but now that her mother had a steady job, maybe there would be a bit more at mealtime. She still studied by candlelight some evenings, but the lights would be back on soon. And now, she had Lucia to talk to at lunch, to share the small triumphs and frustrations of daily life. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't look so bleak. One day, about 2 weeks after Rosa started her job, Sergio arrived unannounced in the evening. He had a pleased smile on his face, and Rosa invited him inside. The house was still modest, still cramped, but at least they had one light bulb glowing overhead now, the electricity partially restored. Natalia and Pablo peeked at Sergio from behind a chair, giggling softly at their own daring. Eliana stood beside her mother, wondering what new development Sergio was about to share. He cleared his throat and said, "I wanted to let you know that you've been doing excellent work, Rosa. So much so that I'd like to make your position permanent. It will come with a small increase in pay. I appreciate your diligence and care." Rosa gasped softly, her eyes shining. Sergio looked at Eliana and added, "Your kindness started all of this, Eliana. Without you, I wouldn't have thought to look beyond my usual circle. You reminded me that good people are everywhere, and that it's worth investing in them." Eliana flushed, murmuring a thank you. After Sergio left, Rosa turned to Eliana, tears of happiness glimmering. "We're going to be okay," she said, her voice trembling with relief. "Maybe not rich, maybe not without work to do, but okay. We can catch up on the bills. We can buy better groceries. You and your siblings will have what you need." Eliana hugged her tightly, and Natalia and Pablo joined in, a tangle of arms and laughter in the dim kitchen. The next day at school, Eliana found Lucia waiting for her under the tree. Instead of bread alone, Eliana now had a small piece of fruit and a bit of cheese, enough to share. Lucia noticed and smiled. "Things are getting better, aren't they?" she asked gently. Eliana nodded, smiling back. "They are," she said, and it felt so good to say it out loud. Of course, life was still not perfect. Matteo and his friends still looked down on her, snickering at her old shoes. But this time, when Matteo sneered, "Who helped you out this time, hero?" Eliana didn't flinch. She just shrugged and said, "I don't need your approval." She was learning that some people would never understand, and that was their loss. Lucia stood beside her, arms crossed, and said calmly, "Leave her alone." Maybe it was the new confidence in Eliana's voice, or the fact that she finally had someone backing her up, but Matteo just rolled his eyes and walked away. For Eliana, it was a quiet victory. After school, Eliana ran to the repair shop, excited to tell Carmen the good news about her mother's job becoming permanent. Carmen grinned, a wrench in hand. "I'm happy for you, kid. You deserve this." Then Carmen hesitated, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "You know, Eliana, I've been thinking. You pick things up fast. If you're interested, I could teach you more advanced repairs, maybe even let you work on small motors. Eventually, you might have a real skill set." Eliana's heart leapt. "I'd love that," she said, trying not to sound too eager. Carmen nodded. "All right, we'll start next week. I'll pay you a bit more too, just a little raise for the extra responsibility." Eliana nearly laughed with joy. Every piece of her life was starting to come together, slowly but surely. She would have a skill that could support her family. Her mother had a stable job. They were going to turn the electricity fully back on any day now. That evening, as Eliana walked home, she spotted Sergio's car again. He was helping his father out, taking him for a drive around the neighborhood. She caught his eye and waved, smiling. The old man was in the passenger seat, staring out the window with a content look. Sergio raised his hand in greeting. Eliana thought about how a simple act of kindness, offering half a sandwich to a confused stranger, had set all these changes in motion. It didn't fix the entire world, but it changed their world enough. When she reached the door of the house, she heard laughter inside. The light bulb glowed softly overhead as her mother, Natalia, and Pablo gathered around the table. The shelves weren't empty anymore. They had a bit of bread, some fresh fruit, a carton of milk. Rosa looked tired but satisfied. her shoulders no longer drooping under invisible weights. Natalia was showing Pablo some drawings she had done at school, and he was praising her talents enthusiastically. Eliana stepped inside, and Rosa turned to her, smiling. "Welcome home," her mother said simply, but there was so much meaning in those words now. Home was no longer a place of constant fear and uncertainty. Home was where they worked together, helped each other, and found ways to keep moving forward. Eliana put her backpack down and joined them at the table. She told them about Carmen's offer, about how she would learn more about repairs and get paid a little better. Natalia squealed with delight, and Pablo said, "You're going to be the best mechanic in the neighborhood." Rosa nodded proudly, smoothing Eliana's hair. "I always knew you'd make something of yourself," she said softly. "You've got a good heart and a steady mind." They made dinner together, rice, a few vegetables, some beans, and a sprinkle of cheese on top, and it tasted better than anything Eliana could remember in a long time. Afterwards, they cleaned up by the dim light of their single bulb. Soon, Rosa promised, they'd pay the rest of the bill and have full power restored, one step at a time. They had learned patience through hardship, and now that patience was paying off. In the following days, Sergio kept his promise and made sure Rosa was settling well. He mentioned that his father asked about that nice girl from the park sometimes, and Eliana blushed, pleased that she had made such an impression. Carmen, true to her word, began teaching Eliana about tools and parts, even showing her how to fix a simple engine issue on an old scooter that a customer had brought in. Eliana got grease under her fingernails, and at first she struggled to loosen stubborn bolts, but she kept at it. Carmen praised her persistence. Lucia and Eliana became close friends. They traded bits of their lunches sometimes, Lucia bringing fruit or a small pastry, Eliana bringing a piece of cheese or a handful of peanuts. They talked about the future, about things they might do one day. Lucia wanted to be a teacher. Eliana confessed she wasn't sure what she wanted, except to have security and enough money so her family wouldn't go hungry. Lucia understood, nodding solemnly. Soon the electric company's truck rolled up in front of their house. A technician restored full electricity. When the lights came on in every room, Natalia and Pablo danced around, clapping. Rosa flicked a switch on and off just to see the bulb glow brightly again and again. Eliana stood near the kitchen table, smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. It felt like a momentous occasion. They might not have much, but now they had light. They had options. They had a new footing from which to climb. The following weekend, Rosa cooked a modest but special meal to celebrate. She made a stew with a few pieces of chicken, something they hadn't enjoyed in a long time. They ate slowly, savoring every bite, laughter weaving through their conversation. Afterwards, Eliana helped wash the dishes, the warm water running over her fingers as she remembered the darkness they had lived in not long ago. Before bed, Eliana sat by the window, looking out at the streetlights. She no longer felt only dread and anxiety. She felt hopeful, buoyant. The world outside was still tough. Poverty and struggle wouldn't vanish overnight, but she had learned something crucial. Small acts of kindness could ripple out into bigger changes. She had learned that people like Carmen and Sergio existed, people who would recognize effort and kindness and reciprocate it. She had learned that her mother was strong and determined, that her siblings depended on her example, and that she could stand up to bullies without stooping to their level. From now on, she would keep working hard, learning new skills at the shop, helping her family whenever she could. Maybe when Natalia and Pablo were older, they would remember these times and understand how far they had come. Maybe they would tell stories about how their sister gave half her sandwich to a stranger in a park one summer day and changed their family's fortune. As Eliana lay in bed, she felt no emptiness in her stomach this time. Instead, she felt a fullness in her chest, a sense of calm purpose. She closed her eyes, listened to the soft hum of the world outside, and let herself dream about what they would do tomorrow and the day after that. They were on their way to something better, something brighter, and that was enough for now.